Hi, Geoff.
Hi, Paul. What are we here to talk about?
So, in our previous podcast, we were talking about your fear pyramid.
Yeah.
And just interested to know how that developed and what it kind of evolved into once you conquered it.
It's interesting because I'm writing a book at the moment. I'm about 80,000 words in, and it's about, it's called I Kissed a Borg Queen, but I Wasn't Assimilated. And it's about how to overcome evil with good. And I'm talking about, it's interesting because I'm talking again in there about the pyramid. Every time I write a book, I end up writing about the fear pyramid again, but from a different perspective. So on the last podcast, which I know you're going to link to, so people can go back to it, we talked about the beginning of the fear pyramid when I had an intuition to write down my fears on a pyramid and confront them systematically to overcome the fears. And then as I started to climb this pyramid, I gained desensitization to adrenaline. I built a strong will force. I overcame these fears that were keeping my life small. But all of these fears were like normal, mundane fears, like a fear of spiders or a fear of the dentist or a fear of martial arts competitions or things like that. So they turned out to be placeholders. So underneath those fears, they were kind of like covers, like shells. Below those fears, there was deeper fears I'd never acknowledged, which we mentioned in the previous video about a fear of my wife, a fear of my mother, a fear of confrontation, generally, a fear of success, because I didn't know what success was. To me, success was some strange anomaly where you get a 7-figure 3-book deal or you suddenly write a lyric for a song that pays your mortgage for 10 or 50 years or something. So as working class kids, who hadn't really been very well educated, we didn't know what fear was. I didn't even know how to make more money. I knew how to go to work and I knew how to do more hours, but I genuinely didn't know how to increase my value in the marketplace. I didn't know that, I didn't know how other people earn more money. I just took an extra job. I had 2 or 3 jobs. So when I went onto the fear pyramid and I got rid of the mundane fears, I started to look at the deeper fears and I thought, well, why am I afraid of confronting my mum? Why am I afraid of confronting my wife? And it was this fear of people withdrawing love. It was this thing I'd been brought up on, when we were kids. If we were naughty, my mum would basically not speak to us. She would completely withdraw our love and it would leave you in a place of abject terror. It sounds like a cartoon fear, but actually it was, as a kid, it was terrifying. And even as an adult, I could go into my mum's house and, and I could feel the atmosphere was not right. And I'd have that rush of adrenaline. I'm a monster. I'm like 16 stone. I can have a fight outside the chip shop. I know how to deal with violence, but I'm still afraid of my mother because she still has that unconscious thing about I'm going to withdraw my love. So I started to look at things like that and started to recognize that all of these fears, this is when we were talking about going to the next level. It was to start confronting that fear of my wife or this idea that someone can withdraw love, that the only place I can get love is from somebody else. So I started to look at things like that. When I started to write this new book, God gave me another level of the fear pyramid, because the fear pyramid is just continued. It hasn't stopped. I didn't get to the top of it and then it finished. It just became the bottom of another fear pyramid until eventually I was able to go the way of the Buddha, which was not looking at fear or anxiety or anything corporeal, anything physical or manifest, actually having fear. I started to look at perception and I recognized that I wasn't really overcoming fears. What I was doing, Paul, was I was shattering perceptions. So everything that we think is frightening is a perception. Even the rush of adrenaline, even the rush of anxiety.
So was this the second pyramid?
The second pyramid is when I started to look at the fact that I was frightened of things that were intangible. I was frightened of success. I was frightened of change. I was frightened of confrontation. And that took me to a place where I realised I wasn't frightened of those things. I was frightened of the biology. I was frightened of the feelings that my body experienced when I was exposed to those things. So my idea of confronting the fears was to get exposure to those feelings so that I could cope with them. I learned coping strategies not from a classroom, but from being in the middle of fears. So it was, so I started to look for the things I was frightened of. I started to confront them, and I wasn't frightened of those things. I wasn't frightened of dying. I was frightened of the feelings that were associated with confrontation, basically with adrenaline. But I realised at the deepest level, even that was a perception. If you are able to go into the very centre of a fear, of the feeling of fear, and sit in it and denote it, what the Buddha calls denotation, take the label off it, you go, well, what is that feeling? Well, the moment you get adrenaline, your instinct goes, I've got to run, or I've got to fight, or I've got to freeze. That's how I'm going to survive. It's a survival instinct. It's a survival instinct. Fight or flight, yeah. But if you go into the very centre of that feeling and you describe it, you would go, well, it's just a warm feeling. It's a hot feeling. It's a fuzzy feeling. It runs. It's only when we click into the label and go, well, that's fear. I need to run. Or this is discomfort. I need to get rid of it. This instinct to get rid of that feeling, to run away or to fight, is so powerful that we go, I can't sit in this feeling. It's killing me. So what I learned to do was I learned to build an eye, like an observer, and just watch the feelings. So the feelings would go, you're going to have these feelings forever. This depression is going to stay forever. This fear is going to stay forever. So I would say, oh, okay, then stay forever. And I would sit in the feeling and I would just watch it. I'd go to the very centre. I'd take all the labels off, all the instincts to run away, and I'd go right into the very centre of the feeling. And I recognised that beyond the perception, beyond the cognitions, the precepts, the concepts, beyond all of these labels, they are just energy forms that are fundamentally neutral. I'm saying this like it's easy. It's not. To sit in the middle of that feeling of terror and not run away takes a tremendous spirit. So we have to develop an impartial spirit and sit in the very middle of that feeling. But it's the same with sexual arousal. And in the very centre of sexual arousal, like lust, because a lot of men particularly are very their body of conscious will, their willpower has been taken over by lust or by fear, but they're the same feelings. It's the same release of adrenaline, it's the same release of hormones. They're not very different. So if you can go into the centre of all those feelings, you can just sit there and watch it. So if you have a feeling of lust as a man, to go and watch sexual pornography, for instance, it's a very compelling, overwhelming feeling. But if you take the label off and go into the centre of it, the feeling of lust is no different to the feeling of fear. It's just a release of hormones in your body for fighting, fucking, or feeding, basically. Forgive my language. But that's what it is. So if you take the labels off, it's just a neutral energy form.
Do you were talking about being in the middle of it and not running when your instincts are saying run. How long do you have to be in the middle of that until it changes?
Well, you have to be prepared to be in the middle of it. That's a good question, but you have to be prepared to be in the middle of it forever, because the feeling will say, if you don't run or hide, or if you don't behaviourally use this feeling, I'm going to stay around forever. Especially depression. Depression has its own voice, and it will say, I'm going to be here forever. You have to be prepared for it to stay forever. I've had friends say to me, I can cope with this, Geoff, as long as I know how long for, because I can't stay here forever. And I say, well, I already know they're lost. So I say, with me, I go into this place of anti-rhetoric, which is like, but basically it's what they call talking back. So I would just go, oh, you're here and you're threatening to stay forever. And I feel like terror, but I just say, stay forever. In fact, come in. This isn't enough. I need more. I need to experience more of this. I want more of this.
And when does it? How long does it take to change?
It can't. When it rises, if you don't engage it, if you don't identify with it, then it can't last for very long. But it has got a certain momentum. It has got a certain energy, especially if it's developed as a parasite inside you. So if you've got like a parasite or a demonic entity, and that might just be a perception. A perception is a thought form, a semi-autonomous thought form. A perception is a real thing. It's a real creature. And it's semi-autonomous. It's got thoughts and feelings, and when it rises up and you engage it, it becomes you. It thinks it's you. You think it's you. So the idea is recognizing that when it rises up to engage, if you don't engage it, it has no life. So this is the next level of what I'm learning on the fear pyramid, is that basically what I was given 30 years ago, I was given this as a gift from God. It literally dropped into my mind, write a pyramid and confront your fears. What I was given 30 years ago was the essence of Buddhism, the absolute essence. If you look at what the Buddha did, the Buddha tried every aesthetic practice to find enlightenment, everything. He did all the self-flagellation, he did the fasting, he did all of the extreme stuff, and then eventually he goes, none of this is working. So he just sat under a tree and said, I'm not going to move until I get enlightenment. And then he spent the whole night being attacked by every being and every creature that came at him. Even the Mara came at him, which is the Buddhist demons. And he said, I just looked at them and I was able to overcome them through denotation. And just, in other words, looked at them and go, they are not a threat unless I perceive them to be a threat. And when the Mara fired arrows at him, they landed at his feet like arrows, like flowers. The arrows landed like flowers. So basically he just sat there and said, all of these feelings that are coming to me, because he was tempted by lust, he was tempted by fear and death, he was tempted by power, same as Jesus when he went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. And he just stayed in the middle of the feeling and recognized that if he didn't identify with the feeling, if he didn't engage the feeling, eventually the feeling had to dissipate. And the moment the feeling dissipated, you are in a place of enlightenment.
Does it get easier?
It definitely gets easier, because, I went from being afraid of a spider in the bath to standing on nightclub doors where people were threatening to kill me. And fundamentally, you would think they're very disparate things, but fundamentally they were the same. They were perceptions that would climb inside me, take over my body of conscious will. They call this the bliss body, or the causal body. This is the body within us that creates causation in the world. It would take over my conscious will and it would control my life. So a spider in the corner of the room, I can't sleep because there's a spider in the corner of the room. And at some point it's going to come down and it's going to climb over me, and maybe it'll get in my mouth. All of these exaggerated cartoon fears. So when I overcame that fear, the next step was to overcome the next fear and the next fear. And I realised that if I was prepared to sit in that feeling, pick a spider up, hold it, experience the feeling eventually goes, oh, he's not biting, he's not engaging, he's not identifying. Then the feeling falls away because it has nowhere to go, it has nothing to feed off. So eventually this is what they call you become a spiritual athlete. It's like spiritual fasting. You fast yourself of all of these perceptions. So all fear is based on perception. If you can find that centre place, that where they call it the Moses eye or the ark, or the very still centre, you can sit and watch those feelings. And this is what I did on the door. I had people saying, I'm going to kill you and I'm going to shoot you. And I'd go, okay, what, you're going to do it from over there? You're going to do it from right back there, are you? And he would have, maybe he's got 5 friends holding back and he's going to kill me. And I'd say to his friends, let him go. Let's see what he's got. I said, step over. And you would sit in that feeling and you would dare it. If I buy that perception, now that guy's a real threat, then he's a real threat. If I don't buy that perception, it dies in the air. It literally dies in the air. It has no power. So we go from being afraid of a real item, a real thing, a real situation. It's very tangible. Then we go to recognizing we're not really afraid of that. We're afraid of the biology. So you get desensitization to the biology. So you sit in the feelings and you go, oh, this is okay. And then you start to go to the place where consciousness frees you from denotation. I'm quoting the Buddha. In other words, your awareness that this is just a perception frees you from the perception. But you still have to absorb 99% of it before it gives up the ghost. So that fear might come, and you might have all the normal, it might be thousands and thousands of years old, this biology. So you've got all the normal feelings of adrenaline, and you just go, oh, that's perception. All of it's perception, and I'm not gonna buy into that. So absolutely do your worst.
So go back to the spider. When you picked it up, I'm looking at it quite metaphorically, that you are scared of a spider, you see it, you pick it up, and then that fear slowly dissipates.
Yeah.
Now, that was the fear went as you were holding it, so it's in real time.
In the middle of the battleground.
Yes, and then when you put the spider down, is that your fear gone, or can it come? Does it start growing and developing if you don't come back and look at the spider?
Well, some of the fears, again, it's a really perceptive question, because some of the fears went as soon as I looked at them. I go, well, I've got a fear of, I've got a fear of whatever, like dentists. Some of the fears, I didn't even have to go. I just said, oh, I'm going to put that on the pyramid. And as soon as I put it on the pyramid, it went, he's onto us, and it disappeared. Other fears I had to confront several times. I went to the dentist, and I just made a joke of it. I hadn't been to the dentist for years because I was terrified of dentists, because I'd had a trauma at a dentist when I was a kid. So I went out to fill in forms, and he said, what's your job? And I put, I'm a buccaneer. How long has it been since you've been to the dentist? I wrote, ages. And when they took the form in, I heard the dentist laughing. And I went in, she said, so you're a buccaneer then, are you? And so we had a laugh about it. So the fear was destroyed just by the fact that I was laughing. And the fact that I was laughing was saying, I'm not buying into this perception that this is fearful. So I never had a fear of dentists again. Not anything. No adrenaline, nothing. Spiders, I picked it up, put it down, picked it up, let it run around my hand. And eventually that went quite quick. Some fears took a few times. With the fear of the door, you get to the level where most situations don't phase you. Most situations don't even give you adrenaline. It takes a very serious situation to trigger any kind of adrenaline. But you still need some adrenaline there. You still need that release of adrenaline, because you are in life and death situations. So it's not that you want to get completely rid of that feeling or that release. It's just that you no longer buy into it as fear. You go, oh, this is just my body releasing adrenaline. It's releasing cortisol. It's going to balance my blood pressures. If I get injured, it's going to seal my wounds. If I need to fight, it's going to give me a turbo drive. If I need to run, it's going to give me that 100 yards of energy.
Yeah, so you're still careful.
So I'm still careful.
I mean, it's the same with spiders.
It's not arrogant.
You don't want to pick up a poisonous spider.
No, so there are. I remember one friend saying to me, I went in a cage with this crazy dog with all of this armory on. He said, and I still feel fear with dogs. I said, yeah, but you should, but it's not a debilitating fear anymore. You should feel afraid of dogs. As in, I don't mean that you're afraid of it. You expect to get a bit of adrenaline because your body needs that. But there comes a point beyond that as well. There comes a point, Paul, beyond all of that, where you find the still center and there is no fear. There's no release of adrenaline. There's none at all, because the perception of it is gone. So there's just nothing. In the still center, none of that exists. It can't exist. If it walks into your vicinity, it is dissolved immediately. It's what somebody said to Ushaba, the founder of Aikido. Don't you worry about somebody challenging you. And he laughed and said, no, I wouldn't be worried about that. He said, because if they approached me, they would realize they were taking on the whole universe. But for him to get to that place, and he was the whole universe, that's the point. In the still center, in the Atman, you are the Brahman. In that place of the soul, you are God. So the Atman and the Brahman are one, or the soul and the super soul are one. So in that very center place, none of that exists. Everything just dissolves. It doesn't even present itself, because if it presented itself, it would be destroyed on impact. So that, you're talking about a place of enlightenment. But I've read people like Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist, being doing a talk, and somebody screaming at the back of the hall at him, and he choked with fear. He said, I had to run outside and get my breath. I lost my breath. He said, I realised that potential was always there. It was always there. So it's not being arrogant, and it's not saying I'm not afraid. It's just saying that I recognise that that's adrenaline. I understand that that's adrenaline. And I understand at the very centre of that, what it does and why it does it. But I understand at the centre of it, I don't need to run away. Because that fear, that adrenaline might be coming because I'm doing a public talk, or because I've got a presentation at work, or because I've got to knock the neighbour's door and say your music's too loud, or it might be because I've got a deadline. I don't need all that adrenaline for those kind of things. So it's recognising at the base level we are afraid of items and we think they're really fearful, so we overcome that fear, and then we realise that we're afraid of the biology. Then we realise that beyond the biology, it's just a perception. So we are afraid of perceptions. And society uses that. Society says, here's the scary thing. We've taught you this since you was a kid. This is scary. This is a disease. And you haven't got the answer. You haven't got the answer. This problem is unassailable. But we can give you the answer in this injection, in this pill, in this antivirus, in this, You remember ages ago, it was like 1 in 10 are going to get cancer. And then suddenly 1 in 5 are going to get cancer. And then suddenly 1 in 2 are going to get cancer. It won't be long before they're saying everyone is going to get cancer. So you are bombarded 24 hours a day with messages of fear, and it keeps everybody small. But once you recognise that it's all perceptual, that the government can't protect me, if I give my protection to the government, I'm weakened. There's only one place we're protected, and that's when we connect to God, when we entangle with God, or the Godhead, or whatever you want to call it. So whilst we allow society to observe for us, we don't observe for ourselves. Whilst we let society protect us and care for us, we don't protect ourselves, we don't care for ourselves. We give it all over to them, which means every time society or government want to maneuver the masses, they just say, here's something to be very afraid of, and here's the solution. We'll give you the solution. And it actually moves masses of people like a shepherd with sheep. So once you get to the place of perception, you go, that is a name and a label, and with abstract ideas that I'm not buying. I don't believe that. In fact, in the end, you just don't watch it. You don't watch the news. You don't watch the soaps. Don't watch that stuff.
And it also influences how we talk to ourselves in our mind. And that was something else that...
Well, it climbs in your mind, Paul, and talks for you. That's the problem. A perception is a semi-autonomous being. So if you buy a perception... It's
talking for you.
It's talking for you. It's an energy form that goes inside, and he said, he likes this perception. He's going to intercourse with this perception. He's going to create a covenant with this perception, and that perception sits in you like a parasite, and it controls your life. It says you can't go here, you can't go there because it's very dangerous. This is where you need to stay. So the idea is that we fast. Spiritual fasting is that we make ourselves hench. We get rid of all of those perceptions. We shrink them, and we expand our consciousness, and we start seeing, there's so much out there. There's so much potential, but I can't get to that potential while I believe these perceptions. And I can't get rid of these perceptions unless I'm prepared to challenge them. And if I'm going to challenge perception, I've got to challenge society. If I challenge society, I've got to challenge fucking reality. That's a difficult thing, because that can create cognitive dissonance. Suddenly you're going, is it just me? People have no idea that I'm writing a book at the moment about overcoming evil. That etymologically, evil is anything that is not coherent with the body, anything that breaks the body's incongruence. So the air can be evil, food can be evil. Thoughts and words are living beings. It's all, perceptions, concepts, precepts, cognitions. They are living creatures, they're beings that live inside you if you accept them. So being freed from denotation by consciousness is just basically the Buddha saying, I recognise that these are labels and I don't have to buy them. I've still got to live in the world. I'm still going to go and make a little bit of money, but I'm not going to take any of it too seriously.